恭请大德圣听，维持法会及一切众生，请转妙法轮，教导我们如何了生脱世，离苦得乐，殊证无生。Will the Sangha with great virtue, out of compassion for the sake of this assembly and all living beings, please turn the wonderful Dharma will to teach us how to leave sufferings and attain bliss, and end birth and death, and quickly realize non-birth.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Homage to the blessed, noble, and perfectly enlightened one. Namo sadanto suchetoye alahati sanmya sanputoche. 无上甚深微妙法，百千万劫难遭遇。我今见闻得受持，愿解如来真实义。Supreme and wondrous Dharma, subtle and profound, rarely is encountered, even in a billion eons. But now we see and hear it and accept it reverently. May we truly understand the Buddha's actual meaning. Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, Venerable Master, and all good knowing advisors, welcome back. This is class number 87 on the Medicine Master Buddha Sutra. I have quite a few slides to go through today. And so without further ado, let's... Oh, and also today is the beginning of the Earth Store Sutra recitation session happening in Malaysia. So most of our Dharma friends will not be joining us online today because they are downstairs in the Buddha hall or joining through Zoom. Okay, let's recite Medicine Master Buddha's name 7 times. Namo, quelling disasters, lending life, Medicine Master Buddha. 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 Medicine Master does come one. 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 Okay, does anyone else have more questions? Anything related to the Dharma? Type in the chat box or just unmute your mic and speak. Okay, I've got today's slides up. And okay, so we are continuing with where we off last week, and then what I have some examples of sutras to address or to provide more context on the Buddha's teachings based on the questions that Ron, Miss Yap, maybe one or two more of you brought up last week about sometimes how do you relate to a sutra or a teaching of the Buddha if you do not connect, if it does not, if you don't feel like it relates to you, or if you're confused. For example, the question last week was, is it wrong for lay people to have feelings of happiness? Like, isn't that, one of the point of the Buddha's teachings? So we will address that today, but let's address that after we finish this particular sutra, since we're bringing it forward, continuing it from last week. All right. Okay. So I won't go through. I will just give a quick summary. We went through pleasant feelings that are wholesome and then unwholesome. And since so let me address an issue first. When you see words like wholesome, unwholesome, even sometimes where the Buddha says, not kind of right and wrong, but along those lines, like unskillful, skillful, wholesome, unwholesome, good, bad. You have to understand that the Buddha's teachings is similar to what we understand as morality or ethics, and even virtue, because those are words that are used to describe proper behavior. But the thing is, in a mundane world, in the normal world, morality, ethics, they are based on the culture and the time that you are from. So if you go to different places in this world, there are different, you can do different things that are considered ethical or or moral. So different cultures have different ideas of morality and what virtue is. And as you travel through time, in the past, what was considered, say, acceptable or non-acceptable can change, because morality and virtue is always based on a current context that's geographically based. That's the way you are raised is based on different beliefs or religious systems. So it's a very fluid thing. However, in the Buddha's teachings, when these words are used, such as wholesome, unwholesome, or virtue, it's very specific in the sense that it is based on the Noble Eightfold Path. And it is all geared towards reducing ignorance, reducing desire, and then hatred. And the end goal is always enlightenment. So that's a long road. And for a newcomer to Buddhism, it's just about how can Buddhism make a difference in my life so I can be more happy? How can it make me a better person, for example? And then someone on the further end of the spectrum will be, yes, I get the Four Noble Truths. I understand that everything is impermanent. And I really, really wish to put an end to suffering and to follow in the Buddha's footsteps, being inspired by the Bodhisattvas, being inspired by Shufu, and I want to end my own ignorance and walk the path to save living beings. And then this particular person has a different lens on which to interpret the sutras. So the sutras serve this whole wide range of people, and we shall see today. Okay, once we get through this particular sutra. So keep in mind, words like wholesome, unwholesome, the Buddha doesn't really say wrong, right? He may in particular context, but don't think of it as how we see it in the mundane world, rights and wrongs, and can do, should not do, cannot do. Think of it more as what's best for me in the long run, kind of thing, towards my happiness, towards my reducing my desires, and towards my own well-being. All right, kind of like that kind of view. And also from a point of view of cause and effect, a karmic point of view. All right, okay, so we come back to this sutra, which is called the Sakapantha Sutra, Chakra Attainment. Last week, we looked at pleasant feelings that were unwholesome and then wholesome. Okay, today we are going to look at the sad and unpleasant feelings that are also two kinds, wholesome and unwholesome. And then there's feelings of indifference, equanimity, that are also wholesome and unwholesome. All right, so let's look at the sad part first. Sad feelings that are not wholesome. Sad feelings that are wholesome. Okay, this is called renounced sadness. So Buddha says, when you've understood the impermanence of sight, sound, smells, taste, touch, and thoughts, they're perishing, fading away, and sensation, you truly understand through right understanding that both formerly and now, all those are impermanent, suffering, and perishable. Upon seeing this, you give rise to yearning for the supreme liberations. Oh, when will I enter and remain in the same dimension that the noble ones enter and remain in today? When you give rise to yearning for the supreme liberations like this, sadness arises because of the yearning. Okay. The context for this, as the Buddha said himself, said, is someone who has left the home life or wants to live the home life. All right. So this is the context of that person. A way to understand how something that's impermanent does not, well, how you say, how does something that's impermanent makes you feel that way? Okay, I've used this example before. Imagine you have to go on a road trip, maybe a few hundred kilometers, like a 2-3 hour road trip. And the car that you're given to drive is a totally unreliable car. It can break down at any time. You know, sometimes when you brake, it doesn't stop. Sometimes when you accelerate, it doesn't move. The steering wheel may come off in your hands, off the steering rack, and scare you. You know, so it becomes kind of like a death trap. It is totally unreliable. Why? Because its the things that it's supposed to do is not permanent. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work. So that's one way of understanding how the impermanence of something or something that cannot be relied on can give you those kind of feelings. All right. So another example, and this is a story from Shufu of how sad or unpleasant feelings can actually be wholesome, is about Guanyin Bodhisattva. So Shufu says that there was a time when Guanyin Bodhisattva, Guanyin Pusa, transformed into a fishmonger. But she was not a regular fishmonger. She was a very, very pretty woman. And she went around the village selling fish with her fish basket. So this particular village, no one believed in the Buddha, which is probably why Guanyin went there. So as she went around, all the young men of the village all noticed her, and all of them wanted her as their wife. You know, that's so Guanyin had a plan. So the Shufu said the village wasn't very large, but there was about at least 100 young men there, and all of them wanted to marry her. So Guanyin said, "Oh, there's so many of you, and I can't marry 100 men. So I've thought of a way of how to choose someone who's worthy of marrying me." They say, any one of you can recite by heart the universal door chapter of the Lotus Sutra, will qualify to be my husband. And I will give you all 3 days to memorize the universal door chapter of the Lotus Sutra. So after 3 days, turns out there were like 40 or 50 people, you know, motivated by love. They are very hardworking, who could recite the Heart Sutra, the Universal Door Sutra, the Universal Door chapter of the Lotus Sutra by heart. So there were like close to 50 of them. So she told them and said, "There's still so many of you, you know, there's 50 of you. So okay, why don't we do this? I'll give you 5 days and you memorize the Vajra Sutra, and I'll marry whoever can memorize the Vajra Sutra. Okay, now the Vajra Sutra, I'm not sure if this is the heart of the Vajra Sutra or this is the actual Vajra Sutra. If it's the actual Vajra Sutra, it is a pretty significant sutra. So 5 days is actually a very short time. So anyway, out of the 50 who passed the first test, at the end of 5 days, Shufu said there were about 20 who could now recite, who have memorized the Vajra Sutra. So Guanyin told them in the disguise of the very beautiful fish lady, fish selling lady, said, "Oh, there's still so many of you." Say, "Okay, if you can memorize the Lotus Sutra in 7 days, then you can be my husband. And if any one of you can do that, then you'll be worthy." So 7 days for the Lotus Sutra is, if you've read the Lotus Sutra, you know it's an even more substantial sutra. So what happened was at the end of 7 days, there was only one person who could recite the Lotus Sutra from memory. Shufu says his name was Ma, and he came from a wealthy family. So they organized a very, lavish wedding, a large wedding. They invited everyone. They were very proud. They had all the customs and everything they went through. And then, and then the wedding ended. And at night, guess what? Before anything could happen, the fish lady, which was Guanyin, had a heart attack and she died. So after all the effort that this poor man had gone through, memorizing the Universal Door Chapter, the Lotus Sutra, the Vajra Sutra, and going through all the, the planning of the wedding, he ended up with nothing, no bride. So right after the wedding, a funeral had to take place. Then a monk passed by. Shofu said the monk was wearing purple robes, meaning, I guess, to mean that he's not an ordinary monk. So he saw the funeral, saw everyone crying, everyone being very, very sad, and said, "What's going on?" And they told him, "Oh, our new daughter-in-law passed away suddenly, and did not even last the wedding night, and now we are burying her. We're having her funeral." And the monk said, "No, there's nothing in the coffin at all. Who are you actually mourning for? If you don't believe me, open the coffin and take a look." They did, and the coffin was empty. Then the monk explained that that lady was actually Guanyin. And he said, because all of you don't believe in the Buddha, she came in the form of a very beautiful woman to try to transform the people in this village, because you are too attached to the forms. And when she managed to fulfill her goal, she left. So Guanyin kind of tricked everyone. So when the groom heard this, poor man Ma, when he heard this, he realized that, oh, everything's impermanent, and he renounced everything, although he's from a wealthy family, and he became a monk. And Shifu said that he was certified to the fruition of a sage. So he became an arhat. I'm not sure what stage, probably a 4th stage arhat. And Shifu said this is actually a true story that happened in China. Yep. All right. Okay. So that's how sad feelings can actually be good if you have the heart to practice. All right. Okay. Okay. Now let's look at, wait, hold on. Let me see. Okay. So last week we also looked at sad feelings that are unwholesome. That one we went through briefly last week. We don't have to go through that again. Anyone who's ever felt sad, that's it. Those are sad feelings that are unwholesome. All right. Okay, now let's look at something interesting. It is equanimity or indifference. All right. And let's look at indifference that is unwholesome. So the Buddha said, when encountering sights, sounds, smells, taste is missing. So adding taste, touch, and thoughts. Equanimity arises for the uneducated ordinary person, a foolish ordinary person who has not overcome their limitations and the results of deeds. That means karma, and is blind to the drawbacks. Such equanimity does not transcend the senses, meaning you are still bound by birth and death. So why is indifference unwholesome? Okay, that's because in the normal world, in the mundane world, for regular people, this indifference comes from a lack of desire and a lack of, a lack of desire and a lack of revulsion. So it's something that you're totally indifferent to. You don't get any pleasure for it. There's no attraction towards it, and neither do you feel repulsed by it. It's kind of like, a rock you pick up from the side of the road. It's totally worthless. Someone wants to steal your rock, you don't care. Why? If you really need a rock, you just walk out of your house and just pick another rock up. Yeah. Someone wants to give you more rocks, wherever they leave it, they put it, you just probably leave it. You just leave it there if it doesn't cause you any inconvenience. So you don't care. So it is indifference. So there's a lack of emotion. Okay. So this indifference is based on lack of emotion. Another word for it is apathy, meaning a lack of interest. There's no motivation, there's no enthusiasm, there's no concern. And yeah, so let me see. So why is this unwholesome? Because this indifference is still based on discrimination. It's not due to a lack of attachment, a true sense of lack of attachment, but it is just based on you're discriminating and realizing that it means nothing to you. So it has no value for you at all. It is meaningless. Okay, it's an activity that does not hold any value to you at all. A thing or an activity or something, a food that, a dish that either you eat or you don't eat, you don't really care, okay. So that's one way to understand why this indifference is considered as unwholesome, because it comes from ignorance. It does not lead one towards an understanding of the impermanent nature of conditioned things. In other words, this feeling of indifference does not transform you. It is not an indifference that helps you as you walk along the path. So there's no transformation towards a genuine renunciation. In fact, this indifference itself is impermanent. Why? Because you may feel totally indifferent to that particular thing or item or whatever it is today, but in the future that might change. So someone gives you a rock right now, a huge rock, you don't care. But if you are trying to build in the future, when you realize, there's a hole in just outside your house and you want to fill the hole, suddenly rocks takes on a different value system to you. You look for rocks because then you can fill up the hole. So when someone gives you a whole pile of rocks that can fill up the hole perfectly, you become grateful. So that's what this kind of indifference is. All right. Okay. What is indifference that is wholesome? Okay, let's look at that. The Buddha says, when you've understood the impermanence of sights, sounds, smells, tastes, touch, and thoughts, their perishing, fading away, and cessation, equanimity arises as you truly understand through right understanding. Okay, that's the key word, through right understanding, that both formerly and now, all those sights, as well as sounds, smells, taste, touch, and thoughts, are impermanent, suffering, and perishable. Such equanimity transcends the senses. So, for example, that old broken down car that, that whose steering wheel can come out in your hands, you turn right, it might go straight or even veer to the left instead. You don't feel any value to it. You don't feel like it adds any value to your life. In fact, it puts you in danger. So that's a way of understanding an indifference that is wholesome. So this kind of indifference comes from a lack of attachment through understanding that things are impermanent. So because of this, you become indifferent to both pleasant and unwholesome states. Formally, the indifference of what the Buddha describes as lay equanimity only applies to things that you don't care about. All right. But When it comes to wholesome or renounced equanimity, it is across the board to both pleasant and unpleasant states. So something good happens to you, you don't really care. You win the lottery, you give away all the money, it doesn't really affect you. Yeah. You realize you won the lottery and then someone tells you, oh, you got the wrong number, you won nothing. It's like, oh, okay, I'm back to square one. Yeah. So pleasant and unpleasant states do not move you. So where does this come from? This feeling of indifference? Well, it comes from paying really close attention to yourself, understanding yourself in the relationships between you and your objects, your possessions, the things that you want, and your thoughts, and understanding how these thoughts have a hold on you, and how you say, using kind of like a logic and understanding. So this kind of equanimity is called equanimity with discursive thinking. You're kind of using the false mind against itself. You're using logic to kind of, it's called mundane wisdom. You're observing the world, you are observing yourself, and you come up with a understanding on how to deal with things. But then at the deeper level, as you develop this base of mundane right view or right understanding, and you go deeper and deeper, you gain equanimity. I have a problem with this word. Equanimity without discursive thinking. And this is developed through meditation. And as the mind becomes more concentrated, you see that even your own thoughts, they just come and go away. They come and go away. And there's no basis to your thoughts. They're just triggered off by the six senses and the mind itself. They just get triggered, they come. And when there's no trigger, they don't arise. So this kind of indifference comes from wisdom, and it leads to liberation, and it becomes a very natural feeling. It's not something that you deliberate in your mind that, oh, I have this broken down car, and it's totally unreliable, it's a death trap, and therefore I'm indifferent. It goes beyond that. It even applies to the best car in the world, for example. You have a chance to ride in a Rolls Royce and you couldn't care less. So it's a very natural feeling. It doesn't come through logic. It just comes through, it's just a natural way of how you feel. And this comes from being through meditation, through very deep concentration. I think, if I'm not wrong, they say this comes from the second dhyana onwards. But I lack, how you say, this is something I can't really explain on. Yeah, but that's what they say. This happens from the second dhyana onwards. All right. Do we have any questions at this point? This might be a bit too much. So, okay. So coming back to the sutra, the Sakapanha Sutra, basically this sutra is about Lord Chakra realizing that his lifespan is going to end in the heavens, and therefore he went to see the Buddha to seek the Buddha's wisdom. And it all started with him asking the Buddha, how do we end all this suffering? All right, so the Buddha is teaching him. So the next questions that he asked the Buddha was about, and the Buddha answered, was two kinds of conduct of body, speech, and what the Buddha calls pursuit or a search, or kind of like, having goals or ambition. So the Buddha says there are two kinds as well, like unwholesome and wholesome. We won't need to go into detail for today, but the Buddha says, basically, he says, when I cultivate this kind of conduct, unskillful qualities grow and skillful qualities decline. That's unwholesome. So the Buddha said, you should not cultivate that kind of conduct. And the Buddha says, whereas should you know of a bodily conduct, when I cultivate this kind of body conduct, unskillful qualities decline and skillful qualities grow, you should cultivate that kind of body conduct. Basically, it just means you have to pay really close attention to the things that you do and how it affects you. And one step deeper would be follow the precepts in to be able to achieve this. Okay, so we don't need to go into, I got a lot of notes on this, but we don't need to go into this unless someone wants to know. Okay, what is pursuit again? Say someone's livelihood, your career, also your vows and your intentions in life. That's considered pursuit. What drives you, basically. Okay, all right. Then, so this part of the sutra is right after the Buddha explained to Shakra. It is said that Shakra died, and no, let me see what happened. The sequence of events was, okay, yes. What happened to Lord Shakra was, after the Buddha explained all this, he became a first stage arhat. Okay, and then he died. And then he came back again, and it is suggested that his birth and death was kind of like instantaneous. So he became a first stage arhat, a stream enterer, he died, and he reappeared again, right there as if nothing really happened, in his new form as the old chakra, but he's the new chakra. Yeah, kind of like that. So then the Buddha asked him, he said, Lord of Gods, do you recall ever feeling such joy and happiness before, referring to him becoming now a first stage arhat? The reason why we're going to this sutra is I thought it would be a fitting way to end our exploration of this particular heaven, since he's the god of this heaven, the heaven of the 33, the Triumtrimsha heaven. So Shakra replied, I do, sir. Once upon a time, a battle was fought between the gods and the demons. Yeah, he means the Asuras. In that battle, the gods won and the Asuras lost. It occurred to me as the victor, now the gods shall enjoy both the nectar of the gods and the nectar of the Asuras. So apparently they drink beer in the heavens. That's what he means by nectar. So when the Asuras and the heavenly gods in the heaven of the 33, when they fought, the Asuras retreated away from the heaven of the 33, or they were thrown out, depending on which version of which battle. Apparently there have been many battles. So when they were thrown out, not only did they have their heavenly beer, but they also had the beer from the Asuras. So that's what Shakra is referring to. And then he replied to the Buddha, he said, but sir, that joy and happiness is in the sphere of the rod and the sword. It doesn't lead to disillusionment, dispassion, cessation, peace, insight, awakening, and extinguishment. Meaning, that kind of happiness is considered unwholesome because it doesn't end your suffering. Then he said, but the joy and happiness I feel listening to the Buddha's teaching is not in the sphere of the rod and the sword. It does lead to disillusionment, dispassion, cessation, peace, insight, awakening, and extinguishment. So that's wholesome happiness. And then he broke out into a verse. It seems like it is protocol for anyone who gains enlightenment to always have poems, to sing a song or to write verses. So he did it himself. Based on the Buddha's question, the Buddha asked him, Lord of Gods, which is a title for Shakra, what reason do you see for speaking of such joy and happiness? So Shakra listed out 6 reasons. Okay, what's the first reason? He said, while staying right here, remaining in the godly form, I have gained an extended life. Know this, dear sir. So this was him dying and then coming back like immediately. That's one of the perks of being maybe Lord Chakra or being a heavenly being and being able to become a stream enterer at the end of your life. So that's one real reason to be happy, so that was his first reason for this joy. Yeah. Let me see. Yeah. And then the second reason is, he said, when I fall from the heavenly host, that means in the future, and it's a very long time in the future because their lifespan is, I think, equivalent to about 36 million human years. So anyway, he says, when I fall from the heavenly host, leaving behind the non-human life, I shall consciously go to a new womb wherever my mind delights. So apparently, as a first stream, first stage arhat, a stream enterer, stream winner, stream enterer, he can choose where his next birth will be. And according to this verse, when he is conceived, he will have full awareness, meaning he won't have to go through the development stages like a baby where you're born with no memory and you don't remember anything. First stage arhats remember their past lives when they are reborn, and he says that his mind will be clear and serene and not confused. And also, it is a factor of being born without you are born that way because you die without delusion. So when you die, you are very clear-minded, and there's no how do you say, what's the word for it? I think it starts with A. That's what I'm looking for. It kind of like affliction. Kind of like stress-free. It's a very stress-free kind of death that you undergo. So which is why your memories retain. That's what they say if when a sage dies. Yeah. So then, even though there might be physical pain, say if there's some physical sickness or not, the consciousness is apparently very clear and normal. So that's the second reason why he's so happy. And then the third reason he's happy is, he said, living happily under the guidance as of one of unclouded wisdom, I shall practice according to method, aware and mindful. So the Dharma that he has understood from the Buddha and the wisdom will carry across his birth. He will still be a stream enterer as first stage arhat when he is born. Because of his memory, the Dharma will be fresh for him. And no matter the period where you are born, or even the continent, say for example like Uttaraku, the northern continent where there is no Dharma, it doesn't make any difference because he still will be able to continue his path, his journey on the path. He still be able to practice Dharma, and he doesn't need to rely on the conditions surrounding him to learn the Dharma. All right, okay. Then the fourth reason is, he says, and if awakening should arise, as I practice according to the method, I shall live as one who understands, and my end shall come right there. I find this very interesting because I'm not sure if it's a translation thing, but it's still based on cause and effect. It's not a sure thing. For example, he says, as I practice according to the method, and he says, and if awakening should arise. So if he's in this rebirth, if his practice is successful, then he says, my end shall come right there. Then he will be a third stage arhat, a non-returner. Meaning, that's why he says, my end shall come right there. He will not return back to this world. Yeah. Then he says, in the fifth reason is, when I fall from the human realm, living behind the human life, I shall become a god again in the supreme heaven realm. This supreme heaven realm is called the ultimate form heaven. It's called the heaven of the peerless devas, or the Akanishta gods, and it's the highest heaven in the form realm. Above this, there are only 4 other heavens. They are known as the formless realms that you get to be reborn if you attain the 4 formless samadhis, or the 4 formless dhyanas. And so in terms of the form realm, Chakra says his next rebirth will be at this the highest heaven ever in the form realm. So he goes on to say that they are the finest of gods, the glorious Akanitas. So long as my final life goes on, there my home will be. So this is the 6th reason. So, and in that heaven, he will become a full arhat. He'll become a 4th stage arhat. Okay. Okay. Saha, you have a question?
Yes, Dharma Master. My question is, when he falls from the heaven, when he wants to be born into the human realm, does he choose his parents as well? Like he chooses who his parents going to be? And that also connected to karma and merit and virtue that the parents will have with this God?
Yes. So according to this sutra, Shakra, because he's already a sage, he's a first stage arhat, he can determine where and when. Maybe the when part, he may not be able to determine that much because it will come from the end of his birth as a deva, but definitely he can choose his parents and he can choose the place. Yeah, that's what it suggests. And there's a sutra called the Play in Full, where it shows the Shakyamuni Buddha before he was reborn on earth, where he was in the Tushita heaven. And there the gods remind him, say, oh, you have to become the next Buddha. Don't forget, hurry up, we're all waiting for you. And then he says, okay, I'm going to look for a suitable parent, to suitable mother and father. And then the gods go and investigate, and then they have like a short list of people who are worthy of being parents of the future Buddha, and then they eliminate one by one, and they say, okay, now we found the perfect one, the perfect parents for you, kind of like that. Yeah, it's very interesting. So I'm referencing off that sutra. Okay, all right. Okay, then after that, chakra breaks out in verse, and we don't need to go into that today because of the time. It's 9:45 right now. If anyone's interested, you can look up this sutra called the Sakapanha Sutra, and you can learn more. What I wanted to show is very briefly, there's a set of sutras, and it is about who chakra worships. So there are 3 sutras. It's the same formula. Chakra comes down from his house or from the Palace of Victory. It may not be his house, that might be his head office. Yeah. And then he is going to be driven somewhere by his driver or charioteer called Matali. But before he does that, he puts his palms together, chakra, and he bows to the different directions. And then his Matali, his charioteer, tells him, they say, well, those proficient in the 3 devas worship you, meaning the people from the Brahmin religion on earth, as do all the aristocrats on earth, the 4 great kings and the glorious 30. So even the gods of the 4 great kings and the gods from his own heaven worship and revere chakra. And he say, so who do you worship yourself? Like, who are you worshiping to? So Chakra then replies, he says, I revere those accomplished in ethics, who have long trained in immersion, who have rightly gone forth committed to the spiritual life. I also worship those householders, the ethical lay followers, who make merit, supporting a partner in a principled manner. So there are a lot of people on earth, who pray to Chakra as their god. But Chakra himself, if you are someone, a householder, and you follow the precepts and the teachings of the Buddha, Chakra actually reveres people like that. Okay, yeah. All right, so there are 3 versions of this sutra. One version, Chakra is revering the Buddha, and then Chakra reveres the Sangha exclusively in another version. And in this version, it is Chakra paying his respects to householders, to lay people who practice. Okay, so Ruchang say Devas or Vedas, it is Veda. Veda meaning the Brahmin scriptures, the scriptures of the Brahmin religion. Okay. So now we come to the different teachings that the Buddha gave. Okay, just so people get an understanding that not everything is about, oh, you have to, this is wrong or this is right or wholesome or unskillful, and you have to end birth and death and gain enlightenment. Not all the Buddha's teachings is that. Buddha taught people who wanted to walk that path. That's what the Buddha taught. But the Buddha also taught many different people with different intentions or outcomes that they wanted in life. And I have a selection of sutras. One of them is called Many Children and Grandchildren, or the Visakha Sutta. I'm not going to read the sutra, but basically there was someone, okay, who lost a grandson. So Visakha, who is known as Migara's mother, lost her grandson, and they said her clothes wet, her hair wet. I think she was mourning. She went to the Buddha because she was very, very sad. And then she just sat down to the Buddha and just was mourning. So the Buddha asked, say, why is your hair wet and why are your clothes wet? And it's the middle of the day. And she explained that, oh, my beloved grandson has died and that's why I'm here. So the Buddha asked her, I said, Visakha, would you like to have as many children and grandchildren as there are people in Savatthi where they live? So I guess this is perhaps there are some, for some people, having grandchildren is like, that's what they, that's the whole point of having a family. You have children of your own, and then you end up with grandchildren of your own, and then it becomes very fulfilling to be able to care for your grandchildren. So the Buddha asked her, would you like to have as many children and grandchildren as there are people in Savatthi? Okay. And what she said was, yes, Lord, I would like to have as many children and grandchildren as there are people in Savatthi. Why? Because, well, children and grandchildren are a source of joy, right? They can be a source of joy, a source of wholesomeness, people to care for. I guess if you a traditional grandmotherly kind of role is you have people that you care for, you cook for them, and it just makes you feel good. So the Buddha asked her that back. He said, but how many people in Savatthi die in the course of a day? And then she answered, well, sometimes 10 people die, sometimes 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2. Sometimes only one person dies in the day. She says, Savatthi is never free from people dying. There are people dying all the time. Then the Buddha asked her back, he said, so what do you think, Visakha? Would you ever be free of wet clothes and wet hair? And then she said, no, Lord, enough of my having so many children and grandchildren. So meaning, if everyone is as dear to you as your children, and given that not a day goes by without someone dying, then every day you're going to wake up to just bad news, to sorrowful news that will keep you in perpetual mourning. So then the Buddha said, Visakha, those who have 100 dear ones have 100 sufferings. Those who have 90 dear ones have 90 sufferings, etc., etc., etc. And then the Buddha said, those who have no dear ones have no sufferings. They are free from sorrow, free from stain, free from lamentation, I tell you. The sorrows, lamentations, the many kinds of suffering in the world exist dependent on something dear. They don't exist when there's nothing dear. And thus blissful and sorrowless are those for whom nothing in the world is anywhere dear. So one who aspires to the stainless and sorrowless shouldn't make anything dear in the world anywhere. So it's important to note that the problem is not in having, say, children, grandchildren, or in the relationships itself, but it is the attachment or the desire behind the relationship. So if your relationship is based on emotional love, that's based on love, that's based on emotion, then when that relationship goes away, either through death or through distance or any other thing, then the outcome is you create sorrow for yourself. And where does this sorrow come from? It comes from emotional love. So what this sutra says is that, or rather it doesn't say, but we can infer from the sutra, is that another way to look at relationships, if we want to purify our relationships, it is to create family ties or ties with your friends or your co-workers, not based on desire or emotional love, but say on loving kindness. loving kindness is the wish that all beings be happy. You can still fulfill your role as, a really loving grandmother, a very caring grandmother with unconditional acceptance of your grandchildren. But instead of just emotional based love, the love is based on loving kindness, a wish that they be happy. So that's one way to examine our relationships. Okay, so that's called the Visakha Sutta. And then we have another sutra where there's actually someone who disagrees with the Buddha. It's the same premise. Okay, there's this person. This is called the Piyajatika Sutta, and his only child passed away. And after the child's death, he didn't feel like working or eating, and he would go to the cemetery, and apparently he would cry for his child and say, "Where are you? Where are you, my only child?" So he went to the Buddha, just like the previous sutra, and sat by the Buddha. And then the Buddha said, "Householder, you look like someone who's not in their right mind. Your faculties have deteriorated," meaning that he's very, very emotional. And he replied, he said, "Yes." Says, "How could my faculties not have deteriorated because my only beloved child has passed away?" Then the Buddha replied, "That's so true, that's so true. For our loved ones are a source of sorrow, lamentation, pain, sadness, and distress." So this poor man, he said, "Sir," addressing the Buddha, he said, "Who on earth could ever think such a thing? Say, for our loved ones are a source of joy and happiness." So he disagreed with the Buddha, he rejected it, and he got up from his seat and he left the Buddha. So apparently, let me see what's next. So this sutra continues. He went to a group of people who were gambling, and he, I guess, not feeling satisfied with the advice the Buddha gave him. He told them of his encounter with the Buddha, and they all agreed with him. They said, yeah, how can someone you love be a source of sorrow? They are a source of joy. You get joy and happiness from the people that you love. So this story eventually reached the queen, and the queen was Queen Malika, and the King Pasenadi. And they had a discussion about it, and then this king at the time wasn't really like the Buddha's disciple. How you say? He wasn't like a devout follower of the Buddha, but the wife was. Just like how many couples, when it comes to Buddhism, either the husband or the wife starts first, and then the other one is kind of like a critic. So same thing. So this queen really believed in the Buddha, but not the king. So the Buddha told the queen, said, that's what the Buddha said. Loved ones are a source of sorrow. He said, how can the Buddha say that? Then the queen replied, he said, well, if the Buddha said that, then that's how it is. And then that made the king like fairly angry. He said, you are just that way. Whatever the Buddha says, you just agree. You're just like a student who agrees with everything their teacher says. I don't want to listen to you, go away. And he chased the wife out. Because he probably thought the wife doesn't use any logic. Whatever the Buddha says, she just blindly accepts. So that's his complaint about the wife. So then the sutra goes on, and she says, okay, I'll find out more. She sent someone to ask the Buddha more questions for clarification as to why the Buddha says that loved ones are a source of sorrow and lamentation. So he came back with the answer. Then she went to the king and said, okay, said, do you love your subjects, the people in your kingdom? He said, yes. And he said, well, if your subjects undergo pain, lamentation, and distress, how would you feel? Then the king said, well, I would feel unhappy. Okay, then she further asked, she says, let me see, who did she ask? She said, one of your children, say if your children were to fall sick or were to die, how would that make you feel? Then the king said, well, that would make me be very sorrowful And she asked him, do you love me? He said, yes, you're my queen. And I said, if I were to die or fall sick, how would that make you feel? And then the king understood. It's like, oh, okay, yeah. The people we love, if it is based on emotional love, then we open ourselves up to future sorrow if anything happens to them. Okay. All right. Now we come to another sutra, okay, which I call husband and wife in every life. It is called Sama Jivina Sutta, or living in tune. That's what Sama Jivina means in Pali. So there was a time when the Buddha went to the home of a householder called Nakula's father. And then when he went to the house, the Nakula's parents went up to the Buddha, they paid their respects, and then they said, Lord, Nakula's father addressed the Buddha. I said, Lord, ever since Nakula's mother, meaning his wife, as a young girl was brought to me to be my wife and I was just a young boy, I am not conscious of being unfaithful to her even in mind, much less in body. We want to see one another not only in the present life, but also in the life to come. And then the wife told the Buddha, I said, Lord, she repeats the same thing, says ever since she was young, brought to Nakula's father as to be his wife. That's how she feels. Maybe, so it basically love at first sight, and they've been in love ever since, and they want to be together life after life. So they're asking the Buddha for advice. So what do you think? Did the Buddha tell them, oh, emotional love is going to get you into trouble? When one of you dies, then, the other one is going to be very sorrowful? Or the Buddha says, oh, no, you have to get enlightened because, emotional love will just bring you back again and again. Well, the Buddha said, if both husband and wife want to see one another, not only in the present life, but also in the life to come, they should be in tune with each other in conviction, in tune in virtue, in tune in generosity, and in tune in this discernment. Then they will see one another not only in the present life, but also in the life to come. Then the Buddha broke out in verse and says, husband and wife, both of them having conviction, being responsive, being restrained, living by the Dharma, addressing each other with loving words, they benefit in manifold ways. To them comes bliss. The enemies are dejected when both are in tune with virtue. Having followed the Dharma here in this world, both in tune in precepts and practices, they delight in the world of the devas or the gods, enjoying the pleasures they desire. So what the Buddha is saying is, if both of you want to be together, then if you base your life on, let me go back one slide. Buddha says in conviction means what you believe in, okay, what you have faith in. And then the Buddha says in tune with virtue, with precepts, you create wholesome deeds. Why? Then you can be reborn in the heavens. You want happiness, right? You don't want to fall into the hells. Then in tune with generosity to create blessings. That also contributes to your family outcome. And in tune in discernment meaning what teachings you follow. So you both walk the path together. And that's how you can remain as husband and wife. And not only just remain as husband and wife, but you remain as husband and wife, but in the heavenly world. So that's how the Buddha gave advice to this husband and wife. Yeah. Let me see. I have a sutra called the Dat. Maybe I won't, there's not much time left. Maybe I won't talk about the Dat right now. I'll keep it for another time. But there's a sutra called the Sigalowada Sutta. Okay, Sigalowada Sutta. Sigalowada Sutta is about a couple who are followers of the Buddha, but they were sick and were going to die. They were worried for their son. Son is a very young man, but the son, why they were worried for the son was because the son didn't believe in the Buddha himself. So the father made the son promise. He said, when we are no longer here, says what you have to do is you have to worship the 6 directions. And the father had confidence that eventually the Buddha would be able to teach the son the Dharma. Okay, so let me share this with you. So basically, in this sutra, the Buddha met up with this young man, and his name was Sigalovada, and the Buddha basically taught him what it meant to worship the 6 directions. So this young man was worshiping the 6 directions, like literally. He would put his palms together and he would bow to the, okay, what are the 6 directions? He would bow to the north, south, east, and west, that makes up 4. And then he will also bow to the Nade and the zenith, meaning the vertical up direction to the heavens, and below, down to the ground. So that makes the 6 directions. And so this young man literally worshiped the 6 directions. Like he'll put his palms together and he'll bow to the 6 directions because he made a promise to his father. And so what the Buddha started out in this sutra was explaining to this young man about how first, before you worship the 6 directions, he says, first you avoid the 4 vices in your conduct. And what are the 4 vices? He says killing, stealing, lying, and then adultery. And then he says, you don't commit any evil action in the 4 ways. What are the 4 ways you can commit evil actions? It says evil through desire, evil through anger, evil through ignorance, and evil through fear. So don't do those kind of things. And this is very interesting. Why? Because so the context is this young man is now an orphan. He no longer has his parents around. And reading this sutra, the Buddha is more like an kind of like an uncle teaching this young man how to be an adult, how to fulfill his role as he goes through life. Okay, so the Buddha talks about, he says that first, and then next the Buddha talks, he says, a responsible young man does not pursue the 6 channels that dissipate wealth, meaning if you do these things, you're going to lose your wealth. And what it is. So the first is indulgence in intoxicants, because that will make you careless and make you infatuated with things that normally you won't be. He says don't, and then the Buddha gives 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 reasons why for each category. So intoxicants can lead to loss of wealth, make you quarrel, it make you susceptible to disease, it weakens your body. It can give you an evil reputation. You may end up shamelessly exposing yourself to people, and it weakens your intellect. So if you're kind of high or drunk and you try to make decisions, you probably end up making like really bad decisions. So that's how the Buddha taught this young man. The Buddha goes on, he says, don't go wandering the streets at unseemly hours, because that leaves you unprotected. If you have a family, you leave your family unprotected. You leave your property unprotected. People suspect you of evil deeds because, no one in their right mind will be out at this ungodly hour. People may spread rumors, false rumors about what you do, and you might meet in many troubles. And the Buddha very interestingly talks about frequenting theoretical, okay, someone can help me pronounce the theater, okay, anyway, you know, yes?
Theatrical.
Huh?
Theatrical. Theatrical.
Okay, you can hear what Rong is saying, because I can form the word in my mind, but I can't use my mouth to say it. Okay, anyway, frequenting shows, and then the Buddha says that will lead your mind to false thinking about where will there be dancing, where will there be singing, where will there be music, recitation, playing musical instruments, and pot blowing. I don't know what is pot blowing, but apparently that's not a good thing. Then indulgence in gambling. And then the 5th category is associating with evil companions. And then the habit of idleness. being lazy. That means not doing what you're supposed to do. Buddha says someone like that does no work, saying that it is too cold or too hot, or too late or too early, or you're hungry or too full, and you find excuses not to do work. So the Buddha is giving this kind of advice to this very young man. And then the Buddha talks about be careful of people who might appear as friends, but are actually not friends. Says someone who appropriates a friend's possessions. So meaning someone uses your belongings or your wealth. Someone like that is someone who gives you very little, but they want more from you. Say you go out and have a meal with them, and they may not pay, and they just want you to pay, for example. Someone who does his duty out of fear, or someone who only is your friend because they think they can benefit from you. It is advantageous for them. So the Buddha I won't go through everything. So the Buddha talks about who are these people who may appear to be friends, how to watch out for people like that. Second category is someone who renders lip service. It means very loose with the mouth. Someone who flatters you, and someone who brings you ruin. He says a companion that indulges in intoxicants, someone who likes to roam the streets at unseemly hours, someone who likes theatrical shows, and someone who indulges in gambling, which causes carelessness. So the Buddha outlines how to be careful of the people you mix with. And then the Buddha talks about who are warm-hearted friends, someone who is helpful, someone who is the same in happiness and sorrow, someone who gives good counsel, and someone who sympathizes. And in each of these four categories, the Buddha expands it in four or five explanations. For example, someone who sympathizes with you is they don't rejoice in your misfortune, but they rejoice when you are prosperous. They rejoice in your prosperity, in your wealth. He restrains others speaking ill of oneself, and he praises those who speak well. So when someone criticizes you, he will come to your defense. And when someone praises you, then he supports them. They say that's a true friend. And then the Buddha then comes to what actually are the 6 directions. So the Buddha says the east represents your parents. So he said, as a child, how should you treat your parents? So meaning, as a child, you should think, having supported me, I shall now support them. Having my parents support me, I shall now do their duties. I shall keep the family tradition alive. I shall make myself worthy of my inheritance, and I shall offer alms in honor of my departed relatives. So that's one way a child should fulfill the role of a child. Then the Buddha talks about the parents in return. What do you do if you are a parent? And so a parent should show compassion by restraining your children from doing evil, encouraging them to do good, training them for profession, or basically in modern context, it would be providing them with an education, arranging a suitable marriage for them, or making sure that they don't pick up bad habits that would, prevent them from getting married. And at the proper time, hand over their inheritance to them. So it's very interesting to have the Buddha explain all this to a young man. And basically what the Buddha is explaining here are the roles that we play in society. First, the Buddha gives him guidelines on how to choose your friends, on how to guide yourself using the precepts, and then how to choose friends, good friends, and watch out for unwholesome friends. And then the Buddha talks about your role as a child, and then the role of a parent. And then the Buddha says that the south is how a pupil should be towards their teacher, and then how a teacher should be to their pupil. That's the south. And then the Buddha goes on, the west is the relationship between husband and wife. How should a person in the role of a husband, how you should behave, or she should behave in the role of a husband, and then conversely for the wife. And then the north is how a clansman should minister to friends and associates, meaning through the people that you work with, the friends that you have, and the people that you meet along your way in life. And then conversely, these people, how they should react to you. And then the nade is if you employ people. So here the Buddha talks about servants and employees. So the role that what's the word? A boss, a boss should play. And then what role should the employees play in return? What are your responsibilities as an employee? And finally, it is a householder to mendicants, to ascetics and brahmans, and then consequently the role that ascetics and brahmans should play to householders. So Buddha didn't say anything about heavenly rebirth or death, or how emotional, how you say, attachment creates suffering. This whole sutra is about how to grow up, how to be a responsible person, how to fulfill your role, no matter who you are, how you interact with other living beings. So basically, the Buddha taught many different people depending on what was best for them at that time. All right. So for a grandmother, the Buddha woke her up to how, even at your age, at such a advanced age, when you have when you place your relationship based on emotional love on your grandchildren and they die, that's what happens. And then or a young person where the impermanence of life has not come in yet, and you have yet to even become a responsible adult, the Buddha teaches him how you can do that. Right? Okay, so it's time to transfer merit. Do we have any other questions? Okay, if not, then Ms. Yap, your question and Saha's question, let's keep it for next week. All right?
No worries, Master. It's fine.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay, let's do dedication of merit. May every living being, our minds as one and radiant with light, share the fruits of peace with hearts of goodness, luminous and bright. If people hear and see how hands and hearts can find in giving unity, may our minds awake to great compassion, wisdom, and to joy. May kindness find reward. May all who sorrow leave our grief and pain. May this boundless light dispel the darkness of our endless night. Because our hearts are one, this world of pain turns into paradise. May all become compassionate and wise. May all become compassionate and wise. Okay, let's do 3 bows to the Buddha. Okay, first bow. Second bow. Third bow. Half bow. Bowing respect to the Rebel Master. Second bow. Third bow. Half bow. Okay, everyone, Amitabha, and we'll see you next week.